Hi, everyone. I'm going to begin the program. Thank you so much, everybody, for joining us. My name is Jessica Lawfer. I'm the Senior Manager of Individual Giving here at the Cathedral. First, we're going to put everybody on mute and ask that you stay on mute to avoid any background noise during the program. Thank you all for being here today for a behind-the-scenes look at the Textile Conservation Lab with Marlene Eidelheit, Valerie Soul, Jamie Cosbin, and Anna Andriva. Marlene has served as the director of the lab for nearly 30 years. For the last 25 years, Valerie's been a conservator at the lab while also teaching collections management and basic conservation courses in the graduate program at FIT. Jamie's been at the lab part-time for 8 years, and Anya, the newest addition to the team, has been a part-time member for the last year and a half. Both Jamie and Anya started as interns from the FIT program. The textile team has been incredibly busy working on the cathedrals, the Acts of the Apostles tapestries, as well as those belonging to both public and private collections. In the coming year, they will continue the legacy of preserving cultural heritage and educating the next generation of conservators through a number of exciting projects. They look forward to the support of the community, and we're so grateful for your interest. The conservators will address questions at the end of the event. If you have any questions, please send them directly to my colleague Mario, directly through the Zoom chat function. We're now going to share with you a brief video that gives an inside look at Marlene, Valerie, Jamie, and Anya's exciting work here at the lab.
If you go into the textile lab now, you'll see things like carpets, quilts, all of these being preserved carefully and scientifically for private owners, people who have a treasured piece of fabric.
Have anywhere between 10 or 20 things going on at the same time. They're all in different stages. People bring things here. We first do an exam. We document. We take notes. We do photographs. We basically write about its condition and really try to have a very close look at the full textile, understand what's going on with it, what it needs. That usually includes some type of cleaning, and it includes some amount of stabilization.
I've worked on things that are as old as pre-Columbian textiles and things that have been made only a couple years ago, and just kind of everything in between there, almost any kind of textile that you can imagine from all different kinds of cultures. They come through here, and so you get to really experience like the entire span of human history.
Textiles as organic materials are sensitive to things like light and gravity and other physical handling and temperature and humidity. We're really trying to minimize deterioration in the future. I mean, if you think that everything has a lifespan, we're trying to increase the healthy part of this lifespan.
The Textile Conservation Lab is here to work on the Cathedral's tapestries, of which there are two very important sets of 17th century historic pieces. We are beginning to do a very extensive cleaning of it. It hasn't been cleaned since we got it, basically, in the 1950s.
In our time, textiles are maybe the least or a lesser respected art. You know, it's associated with domesticity, as opposed to when these tapestries were made, and they were the best place to show your wealth and importance. If you wanted to prove how strong you were, how important you were, you commissioned a tapestry, and it was full of silk, and it was full of precious metals, and it was large, and you could tell the story you wanted to tell on it. And that was your bling, basically.
It's a set that's over 300 years old, so it's not unusual for some upkeep and some maintenance. If you think of the tapestries hanging for almost that whole time period, just the wear and tear of hanging for so long takes its toll. Each of the tapestries in this set will take quite a bit of time to clean and conserve. We expect that each tapestry could take a good year, if not more, if we work steadily on it. Sometimes it seems unsurmountable. And there's no other quick way to go through it if you want to do it the best way possible. I think we're prepared. It's an important part of the cathedral's legacy, really.
So many times somebody will come in here and they'll look around and they'll say, I have a shirt that's missing a button. There's sort of like this kind of joke about that really diminishes what textile conservation is. And I think that if people looked at the objects, not only in textiles, but certainly in textiles, and looked at, how much history and thought and care and skill went into making those things, it would sort of like they would pause and recognize what there was that was important for other people in the future to see in them. And I think, what are you going to say? Every picture tells a story, but every textile tells a story.
I now want to bring in my colleagues, Marlene and Valerie. Thank you so much for taking the time to speak with us today to share a little bit about what you're working on and what we just saw.
Hello, I'm Marlene, the director of the Textile Conservation Lab. We are a renowned program for conserving not only the cathedral's tapestry collection, but also those of other museums and private collections. We are one of a few regional labs in the country, and we aim to preserve and restore unique material culture. As mentioned in the video, the cathedral's main tapestry collection is made up of two historically significant sets of 17th century tapestries. One is the Life of Christ, a group of 12 tapestries made on the Barberini looms in Rome for Pope Urban VIII, the Barberini himself. The second set also has a close papal connection. It's a group of 8 tapestries illustrating the Acts of the Apostles. They're based on cartoons or models Raphael painted of the tapestries and that were woven for the Sistine Chapel and were commissioned by Pope Leo X. Clearly, these two tapestry sets are part of the cathedral's legacy, and we want to keep rotating them on view and sharing them with the public. During the past 40 years, while the Textile Lab has been slowly working to conserve these tapestries, We've been taking on all types of projects on a fee-for-service basis that include a variety of textiles, from archaeological to contemporary, and just about any type, such as carpets and needlework, quilts, flags, fiber art, and costumes, some of which you saw in the video. Each textile seems to have a multi-layered story, and we're privileged to be part of their care. It certainly keeps our work lively and challenging. Keeping the conservation of the cathedral tapestries moving along needs outside support. We've been fortunate in the past to receive funding for conservation and full-time internships, which is a big part of the lab's mission. This allowed us to complete the core of the Barberini treatments. In order for us to move ahead with conservation on the Acts of the Apostles, we seek continued backing from outside funders to keep our mission alive.
I know that the lab has exciting plans for the year ahead. Valerie, can you talk us through some of the current projects that the team is working on?
Sure. Hi, I'm Valerie. I'm one of the conservators in the lab, and I'd like to share a bit about our last year. Even with the challenges of needing to pause work due to the pandemic, we were able to complete several major long-term projects in 2020. A great example is a set of large banners Alexander Calder was commissioned to create for a multi-story atrium space in Philadelphia, opening in tandem with the bicentennial in 1976. And I think we're going to see a picture of the original installation. And you can see how great these banners looked, kind of in a Calder mobile-like arrangement. Not only are these the only known textile pieces designed by Calder, but they were fabricated by one of the foremost 20th century textile artists, Sheila Hicks, whose work we currently have in our lab as well. The space they hung in changed owners, and the banners were taken down and stored and nearly forgotten for about 20 years when they were rediscovered. And you can imagine none of this was in the best environment for those textiles. So they found their way to our lab to be cleaned and prepared for display. And I think we're going to see a picture of one of our colleagues cleaning. And of the 8 tapestries, some of them are as large as 8 feet by 25 feet high. So this was not a small feat. It was so satisfying to see them all return to their new home, the Free Library in Philadelphia, where 2 have already been installed. And here's a great action shot of the installation. And the remaining 6 are now ready to join them and be enjoyed by the library's patrons.
We also worked on a flag commemorating 9/11 from the Trinity School here on the Upper West Side that incorporates students' handprints within the stripes and as the stars in the canton. The flag lived in the school's main lobby for nearly 20 years, and over time, as you can imagine, was exposed to typical environmental issues of soiling and a failing hanging system. These are conditions that we often see with continuously hanging textiles. Once we successfully cleaned the flag and incorporated a new Velcro hanging system, the lab reinstalled it back in the lobby of the school, as we see here. The deep significance of the flag to the school was so moving to us when we saw the students and the staff get very excited and emotional as we hung it back up. 2 years ago on Palm Sunday, a fire broke out in the cathedral. Luckily, the flames were very contained, but the smoke filled the sanctuary and left a layer of soot and particulate on all surfaces. The walls, the choir stalls, the organ, and the 4 Acts of the Apostles tapestries that were hanging in the crossing. And here's one of them. This is the blinding of Elymas. Once the damage was assessed, there was a sense of urgency to take care of the tapestries. These 300-year-old weavings made of silk and wool fibers are highly sensitive to fire and smoke residue that could speed up aging and the possibility of deterioration if not stabilized. Typically for a tapestry, a treatment begins with surface and wet cleaning, but before we could carry out that treatment, we've had to address the thickly brushed on animal glue areas on the back. This was used years ago before the set came to the cathedral as a quick fix to the weakening silk woven areas and separations. And in this picture here, this is the front of the tapestry. We could see some residue on the, the silk woven areas and separations. And in this picture here, this is the front of the tapestry. We could see some residue on the on the sleeve of the man with the blue robe. And to the left on the border, we could also see these dark smudges back in the last slide. And also on this slide, sorry. They're just black smudges on the surface. And on the back, on the right side, we could actually see these linen Band-Aids that were put on top of the glue, and this hardened amber glue just, that's so visible. The glued areas hardened and turned this dark amber, and they become abrasive to the delicate fibers over time. Their removal is long and complicated, but if they're not removed before wet cleaning, they'll get soft and spread further along the tapestry surface and into the fibers. So we've been using various methods to incrementally dissolve the glue while trying to save as much original silk and wool fiber as possible. As each tapestry is cleaned, we begin the major process of the stabilization treatment that incorporates the needle and thread. These are the basic tools of textile conservators.
Beside our continuing work on the Acts of the Apostles, there are other projects we look forward to completing this year. The pandemic paused not only our work, but that of our colleagues and others whose schedules are important to coordinate with ours. We've been working on a modern tapestry woven in 1989 from a small painting by Stuart Davies in the 1960s. Like the Calder, here's another case of a specific art commission for an active space. This one is in the lobby of a Midtown Park Avenue office building. At 16 feet high and 22 feet wide, it is nested behind an escalator, where it has remained until a lobby renovation made it necessary to deinstall. It took a village of handlers and riggers to remove it from its tight space. You can see them squeezed in here on the scissor lift. And needless to say, the 30 years in a New York lobby offered a serious cleaning challenge, which we completed this winter. Now, we've reconnected with an expanded group of colleagues who you'll see gathered here in front of the cleaned textile, as well as the building's facilities team to design and plan for reinstallation, which we're looking forward to doing in the next few months.
And very soon, we'll also be working on a large collection of 18 pre-Columbian textiles from Peru. Some of these pieces are over 2,000 years old and require our team to carefully evaluate the condition of each piece, shown in process here. Having been preserved underground most of their lives, these textiles are surprisingly in remarkable shape, but they need to be remounted and given a safer, stable environment. We're looking forward to working on this series of remounts for this stunning collection.
Thank you so much for sharing the wonderful work you were able to accomplish in this challenging year and all that you look forward to in 2021. These upcoming projects will continue the legacy of preserving cultural heritage and educating the next generation of conservators. I can't wait to hear more about them as you begin working on them and hopefully seeing the final product. I now would love to take this time to ask you all some questions about your time here at the lab and your work. Jamie, how has this past year affected your work in the Textile Lab?
Well, we were very grateful for how the Cathedral responded to the COVID-19 pandemic. They very tightly closed down who was allowed to go to the Cathedral Close. But the majority of our work is done in person, so that really affected what we were able to do. So for a couple of months, we were only able to do very little, mostly focusing on reports, which we are able to do at home. And over time, we started meeting up and figuring out what we were most comfortable doing, creating a schedule so that only a few of us were in at a time, until we've gotten to the point where now we're mostly vaccinated and we're able to all be at the Cathedral and resume our work in person.
Thank you for sharing. So you probably really had to think outside the box to adapt to work from home. Anya, as the newest member of the lab, what have you most enjoyed about working here?
Well, for me, it's really exciting to work with such a wide range of textiles, again, in time-wise and technique-wise. But also it's very gratifying to know that many of these objects come from and they go back to people's residences where they can be enjoyed as opposed to being in a museum, sometimes, you know, kept in storage for years. So that is a really big perk for me.
Great, thank you. And Marlene, you mentioned that Barberini project earlier on. Can you tell us a little bit about how that came together?
Sure. After so many years of working on these pieces, literally over 30 years, it seemed fitting that we should celebrate them and share them with everybody beyond the cathedral. So we planned an exhibit, and our aim was to show the tapestries on a more viewable level so that they could be seen as they would have been seen back 300 years ago when they were made, which is actually creating an environment and basically the interior of spaces, whether they were churches or homes or palaces. And so we collaborated with an art historian, James Harper, at the University of Oregon. And we just told the story from end to end, the time period, in which they were made, the Barberini workshop, about the family, how they were used, and then just basically the Baroque period in which these tapestries flourished. And so it was just a great experience that also traveled, the exhibit traveled on to the University of Oregon's Schnitzer Museum, where they were seen and yet a different way than in the cathedral. And there was also a full book that we published on the whole history and experience of the tapestries.
Great. And you mentioned earlier the Textile Lab relied on core operating support from the cathedral, fee-for-service projects, client work, and the occasional conservation grants from foundation partners. What would private funding and philanthropy allow your team to work on? What are some ways that Friends of the Textile Lab can support your work?
Well, just like we're saying in the past few minutes, our main goal these days is to concentrate on the Acts of the Apostles tapestries, since they're such an important set, but they're in such poor shape. And of course, in order to share them and get them back up on our walls, they need so much work. And it's just something that unfortunately needs some sort of backing in order to do that. And a very large part of our past funding for the Barberini Project has been funding full-time internships that were so vital to this project. And so we hope to be able to implement that type of funding again.
Great. And Valerie, what are you most looking forward to as more New Yorkers are vaccinated and the cathedral plans for its reopening?
Well, one of the things is, although we've been able to come in some kind of coordinated way, we're really looking forward to when the cathedral is open again as a community and as a place for other people from outside to come. We have traditionally done tours, both like monthly tours in the cathedral and of our lab. And so we're looking forward to more public interactions and also different kinds of internships and the ones Marlene was mentioning. Just we often have had pre-program internships or internships of shorter duration for people in school, and we would really like that to begin again.
Great, thank you. I think all of us here can say that we're very excited and looking forward to both the city and the cathedral, officially reopening. So I'll now pass it over to Mario, and he will let us know if there are any questions from our audience for both of you.
Sure, there are a few questions that were posed, but if anybody else has some additional questions, feel free to send them to me. So maybe to begin, for the staff at the lab, what is the most interesting item that you have worked on at the cathedral?
That's a hard one. There's so many, and everybody has their own choice, probably. It's that's we had this amazing couture gown a few months back that just literally took up 18 feet of the lab. That was very, very special. And so I think in my very recent memory, that was probably one of the things that stuck out quite a bit for us. I don't know, everybody has their favorites, I'm sure. And please, volunteer.
Yeah, I would probably mention that dress as well, because I spent a lot of time up in all of its tulle, where it had an 18-foot train, but in addition to that, it had a huge amount of tulle to give it a lot of body, and there were a lot of tears in the tulle, and so I went through and kind of patched up those tears, and it was a lot of interesting contorting, which is something that you may not realize about conservators. We're not just sitting at tables sewing. We have to work around the shape of the objects that we're working on. And since we get everything, they're not always going to be a flat thing that we can lay on the table. Sometimes we have to put something on a mannequin. Sometimes we have to, if it's on a frame and can't be taken off, we have to really like lean forward onto it. And so being able to be in the same physical space and kind of feel the physicality of the objects that we're working with is something that I really love.
I could answer, but do you want to go on to another question?
I think if you have it'd be great to get.
So my favorite recent piece, but it's like asking you which is your favorite child, is a set of Annie Alber's drapes designed for a synagogue in Woonsocket, Rhode Island. And they also are another sort of found set of textiles. And the most interesting part was really working with the Albers Foundation to determine what the best next thing for these objects were. And that was really a great kind of challenge to develop a storage system for them.
A follow-up question from Norma Brown is, does size matter?
In what
To
way?
us, we have enough room for pretty much anything. We've taken on extremely tiny projects, and then our wet cleaning table is sized for the largest Barberini tapestry, which is 20 feet. I might need to be corrected on how long it is, but it's very long. And we've taken on objects that are even longer than that, and we've wet cleaned them. As Valerie mentioned earlier on, she's working on the Stuart Davies, which is huge. So we're prepared.
Thank you so much. I think that that's all the time we have for questions, but thank you all for joining us today. And thank you, of course, to our conservators for taking the time to share your process with us. As Marlene, Valerie, Jamie, and Anya have shared, the Textile Conservation Lab has been hard at work restoring contemporary and historical textiles. We are thankful for the opportunity to share this work with you. Please let Priscilla or myself know if you're interested in learning more about the ways that you can get involved and support the work of the Textile Lab. Thank you all so much. Take care. And I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day and weekend. So thanks so much, everybody.